The Detroit Partnership, also known as the Detroit Crime Family, Detroit Combination, Detroit Mafia, or Zerilli Crime Family, Italian pronunciation, Z, modifier letter vertical line. Really is an Italian-American mafia crime family based in Detroit, Michigan. History. Early years. The Ginola brothers were originally from Terrazini, Sicily, and had been content for roughly the first decade of the 20th century, with being grocers and fruit peddlers. The second-born of three brothers, Antonio "Tony" Ginola, was a charismatic natural leader, while his younger brother Salvatore "Sam" Ginola served as the gang's enforcer. The eldest and wisest brother, Gaetano Ginola, served as the advisor or consigliere of the group. The Ginola brothers first came to the attention of authorities in late 1911 when their grocery store was raided and police confiscated $2,000 worth of stolen olive oil. Weeks later, the mutilated corpse of a former Ginola associate by the name of Sam Biondu was found charred and left in a field. Biondu had allegedly tipped off law enforcement to the stolen merchandise found in the basement of the Ginola store. The gruesome murder of Biondu established the Ginola brothers as a feared force within the Italian underworld. The Ginola-Adamo War, 1912–1913. Between 1912–13, the Ginola brothers took over the Wyandotte area rackets gang, starting a feud with Wyandotte Mafia boss Vito Adamo. The Ginola brothers felt they had secured victory in Wyandotte after a series of attacks on the Adamo gang, which left several Adamo gang members dead. Adamo took refuge in Detroit and aligned himself with Mafia leader Pietro Mirabile, while the Ginolas set their sights on the Little Italy rackets, mainly the illicit beer trade. The Adamos had deep pockets and were able to fend off the Ginolas' first attempts to take over the beer rackets by giving away free ice with their deliveries. Next, the Adamo gang retaliated, leaving two Ginola gang members, William Catalano and John Gervaso, dead in April 1913. These killings were followed by a string of killings and arrests on both sides. Even with the involvement of the authorities, the feud continued, as the main objective of the Ginola brothers was the elimination of the Adamo brothers. The beatings, stabbings and shootings stopped temporarily when Vito Adamo and two associates were put on trial for the August 1913 murder of Tony Gianola's top aide Carlo Colligo. Shortly thereafter, an attempt was made on the life of Tony Ginola himself. More than likely, the attempt on Tony Gianola's life demonstrated the urgency the Ginolas felt in regards to the elimination of the Adamo brothers. In the latter part of 1913, the Ginolas struck indirectly at the Adamos with the elimination of their associate and advisor Ferdinand Palma, a former Detroit detective turned bank owner and racketeer. The era of the Adamo brothers ended in November 1913 when both Vito, 34, and Sam Adamo, 32, were gunned down by shooters near their home. The Ginola gang would now reign supreme for roughly the next 4 to 5 years as the dominant Italian crime group in Detroit. The Ginola gang controlled the most lucrative rackets within Detroit's Italian underworld, and the gang would spawn the career of some of the most notable crime figures in Detroit history. Top members of the gang who would go on to lead the Detroit Mafia and rule the local underworld included John Vitale, Salvatore Catalano, Angelo Melli, William Tacco, Joseph Zerilli, Leonardo, Black Leo Selhura, Angelo Polizzi, and a host of other well-known area mafiosi. Tony Ginola remained the top leader of the gang, running his operations from his base in Wyandotte. Over the years, his younger brother Sam had secured his reputation as a tough enforcer who led a group of killers, while Gaetano remained the advisor of the group. The Ginola-Vitale War, 1918–1919. At the beginning of the 20th century, the Ginola brothers had aligned themselves with Wyandotte area mobster John Vitale, who had entered the liquor business with associates Sam Cipriano, Peter Bosco, and Joseph Stefano. The Ginola-Vitale alliance and their liquor combine were the main competitors of the Adamo brothers and was the key to the Adamo opposition, as neither the Ginola or Vitale group could take on the wealthy Adamo group on their own. While the Ginolas and their forces fought directly with the Adamos, Vitali and his associates continued to run the affairs of their liquor business in association with the Genoa brothers. With the elimination of the Adamo brothers, the Genoa gang ascended to the top of the Italian underworld, which gave their associate and business partner Vitali the opportunity and support he needed to expand his lucrative liquor business. The underworld power and business influence held by the Genoa brothers continued to grow within the Italian community, and John Vitali became one of the gang's most trusted and influential lieutenants, along with Sam Cipriano and Peter Bosco. The underworld alliance and business relationship between the Genoa and Vitali groups continued until Peter Bosco, a Genoa business partner and close Vitali associate and ally, was murdered on the orders of Tony Ginola. Tony Ginola and Bosco allegedly had a disagreement over proceeds from their bakery business, which eventually led to a rivalry between the two men, and Bosco was eliminated. Animosities over the Bosco killing grew into harsh feelings and eventually conflict between the Ginola brothers and Vitali, eventually ending their association. In late 1918, John Vitali broke away from the Genoa gang and established himself independently of the brothers, while aligning himself with the remnants of the Bosco group. Once again, two of Detroit's most powerful mafia factions would go to war, only this time what became known as the Genoa-Vitali War emerged as one of the bloodiest battles in the history of the Detroit Mafia. The war raged and left many dead on both sides as Sicilian mobsters vied for absolute control over Detroit's Italian underworld. During the Genoa-Vitali War, several of Detroit's future mafia leaders would be recognized as top Genoa gunmen during the violent episode, including Giuseppe Manzello, Angelo Melli, Bill Tacco, Joe Zerilli, Leo Selhura and Angelo Paolizzi. Even with so many seasoned mafiosi and shooters on the side of the Genoa gang, the Vitali gang fought fiercely and struck the first major blow to their rivals when Mafia boss Tony Ginola was murdered in January 1919. With the elimination of Tony Ginola, his brother and war chief Sam took over as the new leader of the gang. The Vitali gang was relentless and made an attempt on the life of Sam Ginola in February 1919, but the youngest Ginola brother escaped unharmed, but his brother-in-law Pasquale Diana was killed. Boss Sam Ginola ordered a surprise attack on the Vitali forces only days after the attempt on his life. He ordered his gunmen to shower the Vitali headquarters with bullets precisely when Diana was being laid to rest during his funeral. No one was killed, but John Vitali was so unnerved by the barrage of bullets that he mistakenly shot and wounded one of the police officers who responded to the shooting and was arrested. Approximately 3 weeks after the attempt on his own life, Sam Ginola was arraigned on auto theft charges. One day after his arraignment, Sam Ginola led a team of shooters into the Wayne County jailhouse in response to the killings of his brother Tony and brother-in-law Pasquale, opening fire on 3 Vitali gang members who were either being released themselves on charges or were possibly visiting an associate. In the brief, but vicious shooting, Joe Vitali, Vito Renda and Salvatore Evola were shot. Vitali and Evola were each shot once and survived. Vito Renda was hit 21 times and managed to live just long enough to break the Mafia code of omerta and reveal to authorities that Sam Ginola was one of the shooters. Gianola was arrested and charged with Renda's murder. During the murder trial months later, it took the jury 50 minutes to find him not guilty. With the loss of his brother-in-law and the loss of his 2 sons in a tragic house fire that occurred in July 1919, motivation to continue the fight seemed to elude Sam Ginola. In the late summer of 1919, a sit-down was called for so that representatives of the 2 warring factions, including Sam Ginola and John Vitali, could meet and possibly determine a peaceful solution to the bloody war which had claimed many lives on both sides. Detroit underworld legend claims that an agreeable arrangement was achieved and that a peace pact had been drawn and written in blood by the 2 feuding mafia chieftains. Whether or not an agreement was reached by Ginola and Vitali concerning equal control over the various local rackets is not known, but it is more than likely that some understanding was reached regarding the liquor rackets and the other lucrative criminal activities both groups carried influence over and controlled. From all accounts, the war was over at this time, but with the passing of the Volstead Act in October 1919, new motivation for the most ambitious mobsters had presented itself. With the advent of prohibition, the stakes within the Detroit underworld became greater than ever imagined, as tens of millions of dollars in illicit profits were now at stake on control of the new liquor import and bootlegging trade within the Italian community, and eventually all of Detroit would determine who reigned supreme. At the time the peace agreement had been reached, both Ginola and Vitali may have already been alerted to the possibility of prohibition had begun, or were planning to reorganize their groups in anticipation of a new and highly lucrative racket, so even with a peace agreement the two mafia leaders may have decided the other had to go. In early October 1919, weeks before the passing of the Volstead Act in late October, as Sam Ginola casually walked out of his bank after cashing a check for $200, he was hit by a barrage of bullets originating from a car parked near the curb just in front of the bank. Ginola was hit 28 times regardless of the fact that he raised his arms in order to fend off the barrage of bullets, meaning he must have seen his attackers and their raised weapons. Ginola managed to stagger back into the bank, where he collapsed and died. He must have felt somewhat secure with the recent peace agreement he had reached with fellow Mafia boss John Vitali, or he would have never allowed himself to be in such a vulnerable position or to travel without a bodyguard. Whatever the case, John Vitali, the prime suspect in the murder of Ginola, was conveniently meeting with his attorney at the time of the incident, discussing the strategy for his upcoming trial for wounding a police officer during the attack on his headquarters. With the death of Ginola, his gang split into two independent factions, both still opposed to John Vitali, but Vitali was now the most powerful and influential mafia boss in Detroit. John Vitali's reign. At the start of 1920, John Vitali had emerged as the top mafia boss in Detroit. His reign would be short-lived. With the elimination of his biggest rivals, the Ginola brothers, Vitali was now recognized as the most dominant mafia boss in Detroit. For Vitali, the elimination of bosses Tony and Sam Ginola caused the fracture of the Ginola gang, a desired effect, but an undesirable effect was also caused as two dominant figures within the Ginola organization emerged to take control of splinter factions of young, capable mafiosi who would oppose Vitali's leadership. Giuseppe Manzello, a feared Ginola gang gunman whose youth and ambition was attractive to the younger members of the gang, rose to some prominence at the age of 20. With the death of the Ginola brothers, Manzello began to assert himself against the older, more experienced mafiosi. This was met with opposition mainly by the Renda Mirabile family, who were the last remaining resistance within the old Ginola gang to the younger, more liberal members. The Renda Mirabile family were more conservative than the newer generation of mafiosi, which meant they had more in common and could work with Vitali and his faction much more easily. On August 10, 1920, Joe Manzello stood curbside talking to his close associates Angelo Melli, 23, and Angelo Paolizzi, 21, two more young, up-and-coming mobsters. Suddenly a touring car sped by and showered the three men with bullets. Manzello was hit by 8 bullets, Paolizzi by 7. Melli escaped injury as Manzello and Paolizzi were rushed to hospital. Only Paolizzi eventually recovered. Manzello died days after the shooting as a result of his injuries, which included a snapped spinal cord. Manzello's followers, which included Melli, Paolizzi, Black Bill Taco, Joe Zerilli and Black Leo Selhura, were highly incensed and demanded revenge on John Vitali, who was aligned with the Renda Mirabile family and they felt had ordered the shooting. Salvatore Catalanot, known to his friends as Singing Sam, was a young and charismatic Ginola gang lieutenant by the time he was 20. At the time of the Ginola-Vitali War, Catalanot was the president of Detroit's Unione Siciliana. He became a leader of a splinter group within the Ginola gang after the murder of his bosses. Catalano was highly respected throughout the Detroit underworld for his intelligence and diplomacy, something he learned as a protege of Gaetano Ginola, the gang's counselor. Catalano formed a strong alliance with Wyandotte area beer baron Joseph Taco and Hamtramck Mafia leader Chester LaMayer. The new combine under Catalano has created an influential Mafia faction known as the West Side Mob. The remaining Manzella group members are defiantly opposed to the Vitali leadership, and on August 11, 1920, only one day after the shooting of Manzella and Palazzi, the group retaliates and strikes back at Vitali by murdering Antonio Badalamenti, a leading Vitali gang member and the boss's nephew. The attack on Badalamenti in front of his grocery store was allegedly led by Joe Zerilli, the roommate and close associate of Manzella and Palazzi. Along with Zerilli, 6 other Manzella group members are arrested, including Zerilli's cousin Bill Taco, Manzella's cousin Carlo Manzella, Leo Selhura, John Mangone, Vito Parino, Joseph Delmonico and James Barrico. All the charges would be dropped against the 8 mobsters 2 days after they were arrested. The elimination of Joe Manzella leaves Sam Catalano as the most dominant member of the old Ginola gang, and as a sign of friendship he appoints Angelo Melli as the leader of the Manzella group. Bill Taco and Joe Zerilli are named as Melli's right-hand men. Melli reorganizes the group under the East Side Mob flag. Just 7 days later, on August 18, 1920, police believe that several of those freed from being charged in the Badalamenti murder participate in the murder of Joe Vitali, the 17-year-old son of boss John Vitali. It is possible the murder of Joe Vitali may have been accidental, and the true target may have been the senior Vitali, as gunmen directed a volley of bullets towards Vitali, his son and wife, as they are leaving their home. The reign of John Vitali would end when he was struck by 18 bullets fired from 2 moving cars at 3 a.m. on the morning of October 2, 1920. No one was ever charged in his death. The death of Vitali marked the long end in a series of feuds that rocked the Detroit underworld in the early 1900s. Relative peace reigned following the death of Vitali and the ascension of Sam Catalano as the head of Detroit's Sicilian Mafia. With Catalano finding himself as the boss of the Detroit Mafia during the advent of Prohibition, he quickly organized the remaining Mafia factions under a liquor combine that became known as the Pascuzzi Combine. The Combine was a liquor smuggling and bootlegging syndicate that gave each group and its leaders their own specific territory to operate, while working hand in hand with one another for financial prosperity and the overall expansion of Detroit Mafia power and influence. The Pascuzzi Combine under Sam Catalano created a unified and cohesive criminal organization that controlled liquor smuggling, bootlegging, gambling, prostitution, narcotics and other rackets, and was the forerunner of the Detroit Partnership under the future Zerilli-Taco regime. Prohibition era. Boss, Singing Sam Catalano, 1921–1930. The Detroit Mafia as a sound, cohesive, loosely unified organization can be traced back to 2 early 20th century Motor City mafiosi that came together to begin what would be eventually known by the early 1930s as the Detroit Crime Family or Detroit Partnership. Gaspar Milazzo, a very influential Prohibition-era mobster, was born in 1887 and was originally from Castellammare del Golfo, Sicily. He decided to relocate to Detroit from Brooklyn in 1921 after he and a close associate, fellow Castellammarese clan leader Stefano Magaddino were implicated in a New Jersey area murder concerning a longtime feud or vendetta between 2 old-world mafia factions from Castellammare. Milazzo was a loyal ally of the Bonanno Magaddino Bonventre clan of Castellammare, which in the early 1900s was at war with the equally powerful Buccellato clan over rights to control their area of Castellammare in the province of Trapani. The war between the 2 Castellammarese mafia clans followed the many Castellammarese immigrants and mafia members who found their way across the Atlantic to the large American cities like New York City, Chicago and Detroit, where they settled and continued to participate and organize mafia activities. Gaspar Milazzo, known as the Peacemaker because of his ability as a counselor and mediator, and Stefano Magaddino, known as The Undertaker, were two of the earliest Castellamarese clan leaders to settle in the Brooklyn area, where they maintained a great deal of influence within the local mafia and the various activities their group controlled, such as gambling, the Italian lottery, loan sharking, extortion, and various legitimate business interests. The Mafia crew based in Brooklyn, led by Milazzo and Magaddino, soon found itself opposed by the members of the Buccellato clan, who had also settled in Brooklyn and were involved within the Italian underworld. Eventually, the continued violence between the two groups caused Milazzo and Magaddino to flee New York City in 1921 after they were sought for questioning in connection with the murder of a Buccellato clan member after the man they allegedly contracted to do the hit began to cooperate with authorities. Magaddino fled to Buffalo, New York, while Milazzo managed to make his way to Detroit, where both mafiosi used their high-level positions within the Castellamarese Mafia and their connections to other powerful and influential mafia leaders in New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, and eastern Pennsylvania to assist them in organizing their own crime families. In fact, the relocation of Milazzo and Magaddino and their establishment of powerful East Coast mafia families would play a big role in the eventual unification of the American Mafia, known to its members as La Cosa Nostra or This Thing of Ours. Gaspar Milazzo quickly established himself as a powerful and influential mobster within the Detroit underworld and would be recognized as a capable underworld advisor and mediator of mafia disputes. Detroit had a large Sicilian immigrant population and was one of the East Coast bootlegging hubs. At the time of Milazzo's arrival, the Jewish Purple Gang controlled much of the liquor trafficking in the area. Even so, Milazzo managed to quickly establish himself as an influential mobster within the Detroit area underworld and became recognized as a mafia advisor and capable mediator of disputes, as many of the area's mafiosi sought his counsel and leadership throughout the 1920s, while Milazzo maintained a high degree of involvement within the local mafia and the Prohibition-era rackets. Milazzo aligned himself with Salvatore Catalanot, known as Singing Sam, the local head of the Unione Siciliana and one of the leading and most respected Sicilian mafia bosses in Detroit, who was only in his mid-20s at the time. Milazzo and Catalanot led two of the more powerful and influential mafia factions within the Detroit area, and together they would align the city's mafia factions into a loosely organized and cohesive unit that controlled bootlegging, gambling, narcotics, prostitution, and other rackets within the city of Detroit and surrounding areas. After the violent and bloody Detroit Mafia wars of the 1910s, rivalries and smaller conflicts continued between the various mafia factions or gangs based in the city and surrounding areas until Sam Catalanot was able to broker an uneasy peace and organize the local gangs into a loosely unified mafia group under what was known as the Pascuzzi Combine, established by Catalanot with the cooperation of all the top local mafia leaders and their factions around 1920. Catalanot was born in 1894 and arrived in Detroit in 1905 from Salerno, Sicily, the same province as Milazzo. He was a former gunman under brothers and early Detroit Mafia leaders Sam and Tony Ginola during the Genoa-Vitali Wars of the 1910s. Catalanot was recognized as a highly intelligent and capable mafiosi early in his criminal career, and by his late teens he was a standout within the Italian underworld. By his early 20s his diplomacy earned him the respect of allies and foes alike. Later, after becoming the undisputed mafia boss of Detroit in his mid-20s, his charitable donations within the Italian community earned him the love of the local immigrants. Soon after Gaspar Milazzo arrived on the Detroit underworld scene in 1921, he began to assist Catalanot with the continued unification and leadership of the local mafia. With Catalanot's death of pneumonia in February 1930 at the age of 36, Milazzo maintained his position as a high-ranking member of the Detroit Mafia and continued to oversee the peace between the local mafia factions. Milazzo was now recognized as the senior mafia leader in the area and the boss of the local mafia. Milazzo was a close associate of the East Side Gang, led by Angelo Melli, William Tacco, and Joseph Zerilli, three of Detroit's leading mafiosi and underworld bosses. Milazzo's Mafia group and the East Side Gang maintained alliances with other mob factions, including the River Gang, led by brothers Thomas and Peter Licavoli, who shared the local bootlegging rackets and various underworld activities with each other. Other criminal groups active at the time included the West Side Mob, a combination of Wyandotte area mob boss Joseph Taco, known as the Downriver Beer Baron, and the La Mayor Gang based in Hamtramck, led by Chester, Big Chet La Mayor. Subtle rivalries continued throughout the 1920s between the various Detroit Mafia factions, but for the most part the top Mafia groups maintained a working alliance under Sam Catalanot. It was not until Catalanot died and more serious Mafia rivalries and conflicts originally based in New York between the nation's two most powerful Mafia bosses turned into an all-out war and drew in various Mafia leaders and their groups from around the country, including those in Detroit. The short reign of the Peacemaker, 1930. Milazzo controlled the Detroit Mafia as the undisputed boss for a very short period of time, only 2 months. Milazzo took over as head of the Detroit Mafia upon Catalanot's death, an event that threw the Detroit Mafia into chaos once again. Catalanot and Milazzo were both respected Mafia advisors and had managed to maintain an uneasy peace between the various Mafia factions within the Detroit underworld for roughly a decade, but at the time of Catalanot's death Milazzo found himself in a precarious position as various events within the American Mafia would directly play a role in Milazzo's downfall. Milazzo had been recognized as one of the Detroit Mafia's top bosses since the early 1920s and relative stability had reigned within the local underworld throughout this time, but by 1930 continuing Mafia rivalries based in New York and Chicago concerning his Castellamarese allies directly involved Milazzo. At the heart of the volatile situation within New York City's Mafia lay Milazzo's fellow Castellamarese mafiosi who found themselves being deposed by powerful boss Giuseppe, Joe the Boss Masria. The ongoing feud had reached a boiling point and supporters on both sides in New York, as well as Chicago were preparing for war. Gaspar Milazzo and his longtime ally, Buffalo Mafia boss Stefano Magardino had secretly, but willingly supported their allies in New York and Chicago as they opposed Joe Masria and his supporters. By 1930, the situation had changed and both men now openly supported their allies, including Chicago Mafia boss Giuseppe Aiello, who was being deposed by a powerful Masria ally in Chicago, Al Capone. Joe Masria, the recognized boss of bosses, was incensed by the disrespect Milazzo and Magardino were showing him by supporting his enemies, and soon Masria decided Milazzo and Magardino, both powerful and influential mafiosi, must be eliminated. Masria accomplished this in Detroit by supporting the Milazzo adversary, Cesare Chester La Mayor, the boss of the Hamtramck, Michigan area. La Mayor was born in Chicago in 1884, but his parents were allegedly of Castellamarese descent, so he was believed to be a close associate of Milazzo. In fact, some Mafia historians claim Milazzo was La Mayor's mentor during the 1920s. While Milazzo was an ally of the East Side Gang, La Mayor and his West Side Gang had become rivals of the East Side Gang as La Mayor's ambition and lust for power grew, but it was kept in check while the influential Sam Catalanot was alive. Nobody dare break the peace and cause an all-out war. With the support of Joe Masria in New York, La Mayor began to make plans to eliminate the leaders of the East Side Gang, which included Angelo Melli, William Taco and Joseph Zerilli. There had been an ongoing rivalry and a great deal of animosity between the two groups, and now La Mayor used this as an excuse to set up an assassination attempt disguised as a peace meeting. East Side Gang leader Melli was uneasy about the meeting and felt the treacherous La Mayor could be setting him and his associates up to die. Melli contacted Milazzo, who was recognized as the new boss and a trusted mediator within the Italian underworld, and asked him to represent the East Side Gang and mediate the dispute, believing that La Mayor would never attempt to murder such as highly respected and feared Detroit Mafia leader, knowing it would instantly start a war. Around noon on May 31, 1930, Detroit Mafia leader Gaspar Milazzo and his driver and right-hand man, Sam Sosa Barino, arrived at the Vernor Highway Fish Market, at the time a known meeting place of local mafiosi. While they awaited in a private area for La Mayor and his associates to arrive, they began to eat lunch. Without comment, two gunmen leaped out from a back room and unleashed a barrage of shotgun blasts at both men. Milazzo was hit in the head and died instantly, while Barino was shot in the chest, abdomen and arm and soon died. Milazzo was 43 years of age and his murder would start a new round of killings within the Detroit Mafia, but this next round of killings would finally allow the alignment of the Detroit Mafia under a new regime and a national criminal organization under the leadership of the Commission. The establishment of the Detroit Partnership. Castellamarie's War. After the death of Gaspar Milazzo, a war ignited within the Detroit Mafia, and at the same time the Castellamarie's War in New York had officially begun. During this time in Detroit, Chester La Mayor, with the support of powerful New York boss Joe Masrio, was recognized as the new Detroit Mafia boss. His reign was plagued by the fact that he was a marked man, not only by his fellow mafiosi, but by local law enforcement who continuously raided his business establishments such as his speakeasies and interfered with his other rackets. La Mayor went into hiding while more than a dozen mafia members were killed in Detroit during the East Side Gang-West Side Gang War that lasted roughly a year. In February 1931, La Mayor was betrayed by two of his own men and shot in the back as he met with them in his home. The death of La Mayor in early 1931 and later various other mafia leaders such as Joe Taco allowed the remaining Detroit Mafia leaders to unite under one group and leadership, that of the reigning East Side Gang leaders, Angelo Melli, Black, Bill Taco and Joe Uno Zerilli. Alongside Melli, Taco and Zerilli would be their allies John Prizziola and Peter Licavolia, who become part of the Detroit Partnership's ruling council, the crime family's top leadership committee. This was basically the formation of the Detroit Crime Family, or Detroit Partnership as it became known within the American underworld. At the same time, Detroit's mafia factions were in opposition of each other once more throughout 1931. The Castellamarie's War raged on within New York's Italian underworld, pitting the city's two most powerful, old-world Sicilian bosses and their supporters against each other. The assassination of New York Mafia boss of bosses, Joe Masrio, on April 15, 1931 effectively ended the large-scale mafia war based in New York. The next round of events in New York's Italian underworld would influence not only Detroit's underworld future, but basically that of the American underworld. Soon after the death of Joe Masrio, his main rival and successor, Salvatore Maranzano, was murdered on September 10, 1931 by a rising faction of young mafia leaders within the New York Mafia. These young, modern mafia leaders had helped Maranzano eliminate Masrio, but all the while they were biding their time and planning their eventual takeover of the New York underworld and consolidation of the Italian underworld nationwide. The death of New York's two old-world-style mafia leaders, Masrio and Maranzano, signaled and solidified the rise of a young, modern mafia leader, Charles "Lucky" Luciano, and his supporters known as the Young Turks. Under the leadership of Luciano and the allied leaders within New York's five families came the establishment of the Commission, the ruling committee of the American Mafia. Under the New York Mafia's new regime, which included bosses Charlie "Lucky" Luciano, Joseph "Joe" Bananas Bonanno, Vince Mangano, Thomas Galliano and Joseph Profaci, the Detroit Partnership was officially recognized within the Italian-American underworld's new organizational structure. The powerful Midwest crime family became one of the 24 original mafia crime families that comprised La Cosa Nostra in America and began its dominance within the Michigan underworld. Zerilli era, 1936–1977. The first official or sitting boss of the Detroit Partnership was William Taco, born Guglielmo Vito Taco in Terracina, Sicily in 1897 and known as Black Bill Taco. Taco had been one of the top leaders of the East Side Gang, along with Joseph Zerilli and Angelo Melli, who became underboss and consigliere to Taco. Taco's reign as the supreme ruler of the Detroit Mafia lasted roughly 5 years, as he was indicted on tax evasion charges in March 1936. Even though the financial portion of the case was settled in 1937, Taco stepped down as boss soon after his indictment due to the publicity, something that early, traditional American Mafia bosses shunned. Taco was convicted and sentenced to 8 years in prison and was replaced by his trusted underboss and brother-in-law, Joseph Zerilli, who would now head the ruling panel of the Detroit Partnership. Some Detroit underworld historians and mob watchers believe that Black Bill Taco served as the number 2 man or underboss for his brother-in-law Joe Zerilli from the time of his imprisonment until his semi-retirement in the mid-1960s. Upon his release from prison in the mid-1940s, Taco moved to Florida, but without question maintained a great deal of power within the Detroit underworld and his influential status within the Detroit Partnership. While living in semi-retirement in Miami, Florida, Bill Taco remains a senior advisor to boss Joe Zerilli and his fellow mafiosi in Detroit and was considered a respected mafia leader by his peers across the country until his death of natural causes on May 28, 1972 at the age of 75. After a 1956 commission meeting, the crime families of Philadelphia, headed by Angelo Bruno, and Detroit, headed by Zerilli, were added to the commission. As a commission member, Zerilli acted as a senior LCN leader alongside the 5 New York City bosses and other top mafia bosses from around the country at the time that included Stefano Magaddino of Buffalo, Sam Giancana of Chicago, Angelo Bruno of Philadelphia, Santo Trafficante Jr. of Tampa, Carlos Marcello of New Orleans and Raymond Patriarca Sr. of New England. Joe Zerilli remained the top boss of the Detroit Mafia until his death of natural causes on October 30, 1977 at the age of 79. Anthony Joseph Zerilli had taken over as acting boss of the Detroit Partnership around 1970 when the elder Zerilli went into semi-retirement, but it was short-lived as the old man, as he was known to his peers in his later years, would be called out of retirement until his death to lead the crime family he helped build over the better part of 5 decades due to the untimely imprisonment of his son and successor in 1974. With the imprisonment of the younger Zerilli and one of his closest associates, Michael Santopalizzi, known as Big Mike because they had concealed their ownership of the Frontier Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas, the old man was basically forced out of retirement to lead the crime family at the highest levels once more until a suitable successor could be chosen. Anthony Giacalone gained national fame in the 1970s with the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa. Prior to then, there had been growing tension between Hoffa and several Mafia members, who opposed his plans to return to prominence in the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. The latter included Giacalone, Anthony Provenzano and Giacalone's brother Vito. On July 30, 1975, Hoffa disappeared after he had gone out to a restaurant to meet Provenzano and Giacalone. Giacalone had not been near the restaurant that afternoon, though he was suspected of being involved in a conspiracy to murder Hoffa. Giacalone was later jailed for 10 years in 1976 for income tax fraud at FCI, Oxford, Wisconsin. Taco era, 1977–1996. Upon his death in 1977, Joe Zerilli was succeeded as boss by the most senior member of the ruling council, John Preziola, known affectionately to his peers as Papa John. Born Giovanni Preziola, the longtime Detroit Mafia leader was one of only 2 charter ruling council members left alive and active at the time of Zerilli's death. The other senior ruling council member was former Downriver gang leader and Prohibition-era czar, Peter Licavoli, who by this time was himself semi-retired and living in Tucson, Arizona, not far from his friend, retired Mafia boss Joe Bonanno. Licavoli was a powerful Detroit Partnership member who had been the crime family's Toledo, Ohio operations overseer and held a great deal of influence over Detroit area gambling operations, along with many other personal business interests. Rumor has it that when Bill Tacos retired in the early 1960s, Pete Licavoli was named underboss of the Detroit crime family until around 1970, when a new, younger acting leadership came to power within the Detroit partnership. Pete Licavoli ran his business affairs from his Arizona ranch, which he then sold to Estes Homes for development in 1980. He died of natural causes on January 11, 1984 at the age of 81, the last of the original ruling council members. With the death of boss Joe Zerilli, John Priziola as the Detroit partnership's most senior leader effectively became the top boss of the crime family. Only Peter Licavoli held the same status and to similar level of authority as a charter ruling council member. Priziola had been a longtime Detroit Mafia leader who was greatly respected throughout the Detroit Mafia, but much of his power came from being the leader of a powerful and wealthy faction within the Detroit partnership. The Partinico faction was a group of Detroit Mafia leaders that included Rafael Quazzarano and deported Sicilian-American mafiosi, Francesco "Frankie Fingers" Coppola. These men, along with associates in San Diego, California and Windsor, Ontario, ran the crime family's heroin importation operations. Through their influential underworld connections nationwide, they amassed a great deal of wealth and power over the years with the help of their narcotics contacts in Sicily. Priziola was a traditional, old-world mafioso who ran his affairs and those of the crime family from the shadows, so to run the day-to-day operations he officially named Joe Zerilli's nephew and Bill Taco's son, Giacomo "Jack" Taco, as the acting boss of the crime family. Papa John acted as the crime family's official consigliere, but due to his senior position and the great deal of power and influence Priziola carried throughout the Detroit partnership, his word was final. The long criminal career of Papa John Priziola within Detroit's underworld was influential, but his time as the top boss in Detroit was short-lived as he died of natural causes at the age of 84 on April 14, 1979, less than 2 years after his predecessor, Joe Zerilli. Joe Zerilli had demoted his son and chosen successor Tony as acting boss after he was convicted in the early 1970s, and allegedly before his death Zerilli gave his blessing and encouraged his supporters to name his nephew and protege, Jack Taco, as his eventual successor to the throne of the Detroit crime family. Jack Taco's intelligence and abilities as a leader were known within the Detroit underworld during the time the young Taco made his way through the ranks of the Detroit partnership in the 1950s and 60s. The fact that Taco basically held a Mafia pedigree and was considered Mafia royalty as the son of Black Bill Taco worked greatly to his advantage, and he was eventually named the new sitting boss of the Detroit crime family soon after the death of Papa John Priziola. According to law enforcement sources, Jack Taco allegedly became the official boss of the Detroit partnership on June 11, 1979, in a ceremony held at the Timberland Game Ranch in Dexter Township, apparently as a sign of appreciation for the support his father gave them and to show that they were united as a family. Jack Taco named his cousin Tony Zerilli his official underboss immediately after he was released from prison in 1979 after serving over 4 years of his prison sentence. Rumor has it that influential Detroit Mafia Lieutenant Jimmy Q. Quazzarano was named consigliere. He was jailed in 1981. Quazzarano was forced to relinquish the powerful position, and Jack Taco's brother, Anthony Taco, was named official consigliere. According to law enforcement, Mafia historians and true crime authors, the Taco Zerilli regime still maintains its leadership within the Detroit Mafia, known in local underworld and law enforcement circles to this day as the Partnership and the Combination. The Partnership since 1996. The partnership was hit by indictments in March 1996 against 17 members and associates. Among those indicted were boss Jack Taco and underboss Anthony Joseph Zerilli. 4 alleged capos were also indicted. One was Anthony Joseph Corrado, who was identified in 1974 by the Nevada Gaming Commission as one of a few individuals from Detroit who received lavish treatment while vacationing at the Las Vegas casinos. Anthony Joseph Taco was another reputed capo. He was among 30 Detroit men placed on the record of the Senate Labor Management Records Committee by Robert F. Kennedy, who claimed that Taco either was a delegate to a crime convention in Apalachin, New York, or among their contacts and associates. Vito William Giacalone is a reputed capo along with his brother Anthony. The Detroit partnership has been able to remain stable entering the 21st century, but the organization has been diminished greatly in numbers. It was believed to have around 50-70 made men as of 2010, but at the same time the organization has proven itself to be a very stable and resilient crime family considering what most other Cosa Nostra families deal with in the way of internal strife and law enforcement scrutiny. The Detroit partnership has remained stable and is still considered a top criminal organization within the state of Michigan. Most of their members are related by blood or marriage, making it hard for outsiders, including law enforcement, to gain information on them. This has led to few people becoming informants against the partnership and has made building a criminal investigation against them difficult. On June 19, 2001, 34-year-old John Jarhosa Jr. was shot and killed in Southfield, Michigan, on the 8 Mile Road. Detroit mob associate 31-year-old Gerard "Jerry the Blade" Bianchette was murdered at a Macomb County construction site by a shotgun blast on August 10, 2002. Bianchette was considered a protege of Anthony Joseph Zerilli, and his murder is believed to be stemmed from a drug deal that Bianchette felt Louis "Butch" Stramaglia owed him money from. A large number of associates oversee gambling, loan sharking, extortion, narcotics and labor racketeering operations, along with many legitimate businesses. Jack Taco, having been semi-retired for years, died of natural causes in 2014. Jackie Giacalone, who had been groomed to take over for years, became boss before Taco's death. Joseph Mirabile took over, but peacefully seceded the position to Anthony LaPiana upon Giacalone's ascension to boss. Currently it is believed that membership stands at around 50 made members. Historical leadership. Boss, official and acting 1908-1913, Vito Adamo, murdered in 1913. 1913-1919, Anthony Ginola, murdered in 1919. 1919, Salvatore Ginola, murdered in 1919. 1919-1921, Giovanni Vitali, murdered in 1921. 1921-1930, Salvatore Sam Sings Catalanot, died in February 1930. Gaspar, the Peacemaker Milazzo, murdered on May 31, 1930. 1930-1931, Cesare Lamar, murdered in February 1931. 1931-1936, Guglielmo "Black Bill" Taco, stepped down in March 1936, becoming underboss. 1936-1977, Joseph, the Old Man Zerilli acting 1960s-1974, Anthony, Tony Z. Zerilli, imprisoned in 1974. Acting 1977-1979, Giacomo Jack Taco 1977-1979, Giovanni Papa John Prizziola 1979-2014, Giacomo Jack Taco, semi-retired in 2014. Died July 14, 2014. 2014 present, Jackie the Kid Giacalone. Street Boss, Front Boss 1950S2001, Anthony, Tony Giacalone 2002-2014, Jackie the Kid Giacalone, became boss in 2014. 2014 present, Peter Blackie Taco. Underboss, official and acting 1936-1963, Guglielmo "Black Bill" Taco 1963-1972, Peter Licavoli, imprisoned in 1972. 1972–1977, Peter Bozzi Vitali stepped down in 1977. 1977–2008, Anthony Tony Z. Zerilli acting 2002–2008, Vito Billy Jack Jackalone 2008–2014, Joseph Joe Hooks Mirabile retired in 2014. 2014 present, Anthony Chicago Tony La Piana. Consigliere 1931–1969, Angelo Melli 1969–1977, Giovanni Papa John Preziola became boss in 1977. 1977–1981, Raphael Jimmy Q. Quasarano imprisoned in 1981. 1981–1993, Michael Santo Big Mike Palazzi 1993–2008, Anthony Tony T. Taco 2008–2014, Dominic Uncle Dom Bomarito retired in 2014. 2014–2019, Anthony Tony Powell Polizzolo died January 2019. Current family members: Administration Boss Jackie the Kid, Jackalone Street Boss Peter Specs, Taco Underboss Anthony, Chicago Tony La Piana Consigliere. Capos Joseph, Joey Jackalone Joseph, Joe the Hood, Deanna David, Davey the Donut Aceto. Informants Witnesses Nuff Taco. He is the first made member of the Detroit crime family to cooperate. He held the rank of soldier. During the late 1990s, Taco was convicted of several offenses, so he testified against Jack Taco in 2000 to receive a lighter sentence. He is currently in the Witness Protection Program. See also the Purple Gang, the Flathead Gang. Paul Jaworski, boss of Flathead Gang. References, notes. Sources: Kelly, Robert J. Encyclopedia of Organized Crime in the United States. Westport, Connecticut. Greenwood Press, 2000. ISBN 0-313-30653-2. Sifakis, Carl. The Mafia Encyclopedia. New York, DeCapole Press, 2005. ISBN 0-8160-5694-3. Sifakis, Carl. The Encyclopedia of American Crime. New York, Facts on File Incorporated, 2001. ISBN 0-8160-4040-0. Danny Maldi, The Hoffa Wars, Charter Books, New York, 1978. ISBN 0-441-34010-5. Charles Brandt, I Heard You Paint Houses, Frank, The Irishman. Sheeran and the Inside Story of the Mafia, The Teamsters, and the Last Ride of Jimmy Hoffa. Steerforth Press, Hanover, NH, USA. 2004, ISBN 1-58642-077-1. Bernstein, Scott. Motor City Mafia. ISBN 978-0-7385-4084-9. Waugh, Daniel, 2019. Veneta, The Birth of the Detroit Mafia. Lulu Publishing Services. ISBN 9781483496276.cs1. Maint. Ref Harv. Link.